The cold wind howled through the city streets, sending shivers down the spine of anyone caught outside. Near the entrance of a high-end restaurant, a homeless man sat hunched over, his thin jacket barely shielding him from the biting cold. His hands, cracked and rough, cupped together as if holding on to the last bit of warmth he could find. Inside, the soft hum of classical music played as waiters moved swiftly, serving the wealthy patrons who dined under golden chandeliers. Laughter and the clinking of wine glasses filled the air, two separate worlds divided by a glass door. The woman stepped out, adjusting the fur coat draped over her shoulders. Her designer heels clicked against the pavement as she walked toward her sleek black car parked nearby. Her face was poised, her expression indifferent, as if nothing outside that restaurant existed to her. The homeless man looked up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Excuse me, ma'am, could you spare something? Even just a little?" She didn't stop walking. He tried again. "I haven't eaten all day, please." The woman halted for a moment, turning just enough to glance at him. Her lips curled in disgust. "Why don't you get a job instead of begging outside places like this?" Her tone was sharp, like a blade slicing through whatever little dignity he had left. Her words stung more than the cold. The man lowered his gaze, gripping his tattered coat as if it could somehow shield him from the shame washing over him. Without another word, she stepped into her car, the engine roaring to life. The vehicle glided down the street, its taillights vanishing into the night, leaving the homeless man alone in the shadows. But he wasn't the only one left behind. From across the street, beneath the dim glow of a street lamp, a figure watched. Silent. Unmoving. Eyes locked onto the woman's departing car. A slow exhale clouded the cold air. Then, the figure stepped forward. The city lights blurred into streaks as she drove through the streets, her grip tight on the steering wheel. The encounter with the homeless man was already fading from her mind. She had no time to think about people like that. The world was cruel, those who didn't keep up were left behind. Simple as that. She parked her car in the underground garage of her luxury apartment complex. Stepping out, she adjusted her coat, her heels echoing against the polished concrete as she made her way toward the elevator. The doors slid shut behind her, enclosing her in silence. Something felt off. As the elevator climbed, she glanced at the mirror-lined walls. A strange sensation crawled up her spine. The feeling of being watched. She shook it off. Ridiculous. The doors opened to the penthouse floor. Stepping inside, she let out a sigh, tossing her purse onto the marble counter. The floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline, its beauty lost on her tonight. She poured herself a glass of wine and settled into the velvet couch. The day had been long, and she deserved to unwind. Then, a knock at the door. She frowned. Who would come at this hour? Her mind ran through the possibilities. Neighbors? A package? Security? Setting her glass down, she walked cautiously to the door and peeked through the peephole. No one. Her brows knitted together. Strange. She stood there for a moment before dismissing it and turning away. Then, another knock. This time, sharper. More deliberate. Her heart gave a nervous jolt. She glanced back at the peephole again. Still nothing. A shiver ran through her, though the apartment was warm. Something about this wasn't right. A sinking feeling grew in her chest. The sensation she had felt in the elevator, the way the air in her apartment suddenly felt heavy, as if she wasn't alone. She backed away from the door slowly. Then, her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello? Silence. Then, a voice, low, steady, and chillingly calm. You ignored him. Now, let's see how it feels to be ignored. A cold dread wrapped around her like a vice. The line went dead. She turned, heart hammering, scanning her apartment as if someone could be hiding in the shadows. Outside, under the street lamp, the figure stood watching. Unmoving. Waiting. Her fingers tightened around the phone, the dull beep of the disconnected call still ringing in her ears. A cold sensation crept up her spine as she stared at the screen, no number, no name, nothing she could trace. Her throat felt dry. Who was that? How did they know? She shook her head, pushing away the rising fear. This was a prank. That's all. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her wine glass and took a long sip, ignoring the slight tremble in her hands. No one was inside her apartment. She had a top-floor penthouse with private security. Cameras in the hallways. This wasn't some horror movie. But as she turned to head back to the couch, something made her stop. The front door. Her breath hitched. It was unlocked. A full-body chill surged through her. I locked it. I always lock it. She moved slowly, cautiously, reaching for the handle. Just as she was about to twist it, the lights flickered. Her breath caught in her throat. A sharp knock echoed against the door. She stumbled back, her pulse racing. This time, it wasn't just a knock, it was forceful, insistent, as if someone was pressing their palm against the wood and waiting. The peephole. She needed to check. Swallowing her fear, she stepped forward and leaned in. Her heart nearly stopped. Nothing. No one. Just the dimly lit hallway, completely empty. A sickening realization settled in. They weren't outside anymore. A shadow moved across the living room. She spun around, gasping. The curtains. They had moved. But the windows were closed. The city skyline twinkled beyond the glass, a sea of golden light stretching into the distance. But something was wrong. Her reflection. She was standing still. But in the glass, her reflection was a half-step behind. Watching. Waiting. A whisper brushed against her ear, so close, so intimate, it sent every nerve in her body into panic. Ignored people don't stay invisible forever. She screamed, stumbling backward, knocking over the wine glass. The liquid spread across the marble floor like a pool of blood. Her phone rang again. Unknown number. Trembling, she answered. You don't see me, do you? Her breath hitched. The voice on the other end was inside her apartment. She dropped the phone. Outside, the shadowy figure beneath the street lamp took a step forward. The game had just begun. The phone clattered to the floor, the voice still echoing in her ears. You don't see me, do you? Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She forced herself to move, to breathe. This is a nightmare. This isn't real. But the overturned wine glass, the flickering lights, the heavy silence pressing against her chest, it was all real. She snatched up the phone, hands shaking, and ran to the bedroom. Locking the door behind her, she pressed herself against it, gasping for air. Call the police. Her fingers hovered over the keypad, then stopped. She was a respected businesswoman. What was she going to say? That she felt like she was being watched. That someone called her from inside her apartment, but she couldn't see them? They would think she was losing her mind. She pressed her fingers to her temples. Think. She needed proof. She needed to see who was doing this. A deep breath. Slowly, she moved to her security system. She tapped on the screen, scrolling through the apartment's cameras. Living room, empty. Hallway, empty. Elevator, empty. She flipped to the camera outside her door. Her stomach dropped. The hallway lights flickered, casting long shadows against the walls. And there, right in front of her door, was a pair of dirty, bare feet. Her breath caught in her throat. She scrolled up, following the legs, tattered jeans, a torn jacket. Her blood ran cold. It was the homeless man. He stood there, unmoving, his head slightly tilted as if listening. He shouldn't be here. She had ignored him. He was supposed to be just another forgotten soul on the streets. But now, he was here. And he was waiting. The moment she gasped, as if he could hear her through the screen, his head snapped up. His eyes locked directly onto the camera. A slow smile spread across his face. Then, he raised a single finger and pressed it to his lips. Shoo! The screen went black. Her scream lodged in her throat. She backed away, heart hammering against her ribs. Then, a soft creak. The bedroom door. Her stomach twisted. She had locked it. Didn't she? Her body went rigid. She turned her head, inch by inch, toward the door handle. It was turning. Someone was inside. She wasn't alone. The silver handle twisted slowly, inch by inch, as if whoever was on the other side was savoring the moment. Her body refused to move. Every muscle locked in place, trapped between terror and disbelief. This can't be happening. Her breath came in short, shallow bursts. Think. 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 She grabbed the bedside lamp, clutching it with trembling fingers. If he comes in, I'll fight. I have to. The handle stopped turning. Silence. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Then. Knock. 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 Soft. Gentle. Almost polite. A cold shiver crawled up her spine. Why is he playing with me? Why doesn't he just come in? Then, the voice. Low, calm, almost amused. Now you understand, don't you? Her throat tightened. She knew that voice. The homeless man. The same man she had dismissed as worthless. The same man she had ignored without a second thought. She stumbled back, shaking her head. No. It's not possible. He can't be here. But the camera had shown him. The bare feet. The torn jacket. The way he had stared directly at her as if he could see through the lens. Her phone. She needed her phone. She grabbed it, fingers fumbling to dial 911. No service. The screen flickered. The battery was fully charged, yet it was dying fast, draining before her eyes. Her breath hitched. This wasn't normal. This wasn't possible. Then, the door unlocked with a slow, deliberate click. Her heart stopped. She launched herself toward the closet, slamming the door shut just as the bedroom door creaked open. Footsteps. Slow. Unhurried. The sound of someone moving through her room, like they belonged there. She pressed her hand over her mouth, forcing herself to stay silent. Through the tiny crack in the closet door, she could see the bedroom. A shadow passed by. Then, the voice again. Closer this time. You don't see me, but I see you. A chill wrapped around her like ice. He knew where she was. The footsteps stopped right outside the closet. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then, a single finger slid between the closet doors. Just the tip. Just enough for her to see the dirt under the nail, the rough skin. She squeezed her eyes shut. This isn't real. This isn't real. A long pause. Then, the voice, whispering through the crack. What does it feel like, to be the one ignored? Her scream tore through the apartment. The scream ripped through her throat, raw and desperate. She didn't care who hurt her, she just wanted someone to come. But no one did. The finger lingered between the closet doors for a moment longer before it slowly retracted. Silence. Her body trembled, her back pressed against the wooden panels of the closet. Her pulse pounded in her ears, drowning out everything else. Had he left? The footsteps resumed. Slow. Measured. Moving away. She cracked one eye open, peering through the sliver of space. The bedroom was empty. The door was ajar, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. Her breath came in quick, shaky bursts. Was this a trick? A game? She stayed still, forcing herself to wait. 5 minutes. 10. She wasn't sure. Then, nothing. No sound. No movement. The air in the room was dead. Swallowing the lump in her throat, she reached out with a trembling hand and nudged the closet door open. The hinges let out a quiet whine. She stepped forward, slow, careful, every nerve screaming at her to run. But there was nowhere to go. The apartment was empty. Had she imagined it? She rushed to the front door, hands fumbling with the lock. Just get out. Get out. She twisted the handle. The door wouldn't open. A choked gasp left her lips. She turned it harder, nothing. The door was unlocked, but it would not budge. Her breath came in panicked gasps. This wasn't possible. Then, her phone buzzed. She looked down. Unknown number. Her hands trembled as she lifted it to her ear. Please, please stop this. Silence. Then, the voice. Calm. Steady. You walked past him like he was nothing. You didn't even stop. Do you know what that does to a person? Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. A long pause. Then. Look outside. A cold weight dropped in her stomach. She didn't want to. But something made her turn. Her apartment overlooked the city, the vast skyline stretching beyond the glass walls. But now, there was something new. A message had been written across the window. Not in paint. Not in dust. But in breath. A single phrase, fogged against the glass as if someone had whispered it from the inside. Ignored people don't stay invisible forever. The blood drained from her face. Her reflection in the glass wasn't alone. Behind her, a shadow stood. Watching. Waiting. A low whisper brushed against her ear, so close she could feel the breath on her skin. Now, it's your turn. The lights went out. And the world turned black. Darkness swallowed the room. She couldn't see. She couldn't move. The silence was thick, pressing against her ears like a suffocating weight. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps, her pulse hammering in her throat. Then, a whisper. Too close. Right at her ear. Now, it's your turn. A hand, cold, rough, real, brushed against her wrist. She screamed, jerking back, her feet stumbling against the furniture. Her hands flailed in the darkness, searching for anything, her phone, a weapon, a way out, but there was nothing. Then, the voice came again. Steady. Calm. Too calm. Can you feel it? Can you feel what it's like to be invisible? Tears burned her eyes. Please. I didn't know. The voice laughed. Low. Amused. Mocking. No. You didn't care. Her breath hitched. Something cold pressed against her skin, a single fingertip, running down her arm as if testing her. She bolted. Blindly, wildly, she ran through the darkness, hands outstretched, heart pounding against her ribs. The apartment felt wrong. The walls seemed closer, the air heavier, like she had stepped into a space that no longer belonged to her. She reached the front door. Fumbled for the handle. Twisted it hard. It flung open. She stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air. The lights here were on. The world was normal. Had it been a dream? A hallucination? Her bare feet patted against the cold floor as she turned back to look at her apartment. The door was still open. The bedroom light flickered. She knew she wasn't alone in there. But when she stared inside, it was empty. Everything was in place. The furniture. The wine glass. The curtain swayed slightly as if an open window had let in the wind. Except, there were no open windows. She backed away slowly, too afraid to go in but too afraid to stay. Then, her phone buzzed. Her blood ran cold. Unknown number. Her hands trembled as she lifted it to her ear. A pause. A breath. Then. He was just like you once. Her stomach twisted. Who? Silence. Then, the voice, low and deliberate. The man you ignored. He wasn't always homeless. He had a life. A name. A family. Her lips parted, but no words came. He had everything. Until someone took it away. Until someone made him invisible. Her knees buckled. She remembered now. The man. He wasn't always outside that restaurant. He wasn't always forgotten. A memory surged back, years ago, in a cold boardroom, a desperate man begging for another chance. She had been there. She had signed the papers. She had looked him in the eye and dismissed him like he was nothing. And now? Now he had returned. The phone clicked off. Then, her apartment door slammed shut. And the hallway light flickered out. Darkness swallowed the hallway. She stood frozen, her breath coming in shallow, uneven gasps. No. No. This isn't happening. Her apartment door had slammed shut on its own. The hallway lights had gone out. The eerie silence pressed down on her chest like an invisible weight. Then, her phone vibrated. She hesitated before glancing at the screen. Unknown number. Her fingers trembled as she answered. Hello? A pause. Then, the voice, low, steady, filled with something unreadable. You remember now, don't you? Her stomach twisted. The man. The one she had ignored outside the restaurant. He wasn't just some random homeless stranger. She had ruined him. Years ago, she had been in charge of a massive corporate downsizing. Hundreds of employees were fired overnight, their jobs erased with the stroke of a pen. But this one had come to her office begging. She could still see him. Tired. Desperate. A man who had spent his life building something only to have it ripped away. He had pleaded with her. Please, I have a family. And she had looked him in the eye and said. It's not my problem. Just like she had said to him outside the restaurant. A chill crawled up her spine. Her fingers clenched around the phone. I didn't know it was him. Silence. Then, the soft sound of breathing on the other end. No. You just didn't care. She squeezed her eyes shut. What do you want from me? A chuckle. Dark. Amused. Not cruel, but knowing. It's funny, isn't it? The voice was closer now, as if he was standing right beside her. How quickly the powerful can become powerless. She backed away, her mind racing. This was a game. A punishment. Then, the final blow came. You ruined my life. But I'm not here to ruin yours. She blinked. What? A pause. Then, I just want you to understand. Her throat tightened. And then, the lights flickered back on. Her apartment door was open again. The phone in her hand had gone cold. When she looked at the screen, the call had never happened. Her mind spun. Had she imagined it? Was she losing her grip on reality? Then, something caught her eye. The message on the window, ignored people don't stay invisible forever, was gone. Instead, there was something new. A single word, written in the condensation of her own breath. Change. The meaning was clear. She had been given a second chance. But what she did with it, that was up to her. She stood frozen, staring at the single word etched in the condensation on her window. Change. The air in her apartment was still. The eerie presence was gone. The shadows that once seemed alive had faded into the corners. And yet, the message remained. Her pulse slowed, her hands still trembling as she wiped at the window with shaky fingers. The word smeared but didn't disappear entirely. Change. The meaning was clear. She had been given a second chance. Her body felt heavy as she sank onto the couch, the events of the last few hours pressing down on her like a weight she couldn't shake off. Everything she had built, her wealth, her power, her status, none of it had mattered in those moments of terror. She had been alone. Helpless. Just like the man she had ignored. Just like he had felt when she had stripped his livelihood away. Her breath hitched. She couldn't undo the past. But she could choose what happened next. She grabbed her phone with unsteady hands and, for the first time in years, searched for the name she had long since erased from her memory. His name. The man she had fired. The man she had ignored. The search results came up instantly. A wave of shame hit her like a truck. He had lost everything, his home, his family, his dignity. A downward spiral that had led him to where he was now. Homeless. Forgotten. Invisible. Her chest tightened. Her mind screamed that she could look away, just like she had done before. That she could pretend none of this had happened, go back to her life, and forget. But she couldn't. Not anymore. Not after this. She grabbed her coat and keys and rushed out the door. The night air was bitter as she drove through the city, searching. She didn't know where to start, but she knew where he had been. Outside the restaurant. She pulled up, scanning the sidewalk. Empty. No sign of him. Her heart pounded. Where is he? She stepped out of the car, her heels clicking against the pavement, but this time, there was no confidence in her stride. Just uncertainty. Just regret. Then, a flicker of movement. A hunched figure sat on a bench nearby, wrapped in layers of old clothes, his head down, his hands clasped together. It was him. She took a deep breath, her throat dry. How do I even begin? Slowly, she stepped forward. The man didn't look up. She swallowed hard. Excuse me. A long pause. Then, he raised his head, tired eyes locking onto hers. Recognition flickered in his gaze. She braced herself for anger, for resentment, for the weight of everything she had done to him. But instead, he just watched her. Waiting. She took a deep breath. And for the first time in her life, she extended her hand. I'm sorry, she whispered. Let me help. A long silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, cautiously, he reached out. Their fingers met. And in that moment, everything changed.